Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Can't wait to enjoy. Move this forward a little bit. Back a little bit. Okay. Good morning. I'm on, huh? So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you can see me, say hi. What time is it? What time? Randy? Ladies and gentlemen, Randy says it's showtime. But before we start, while I'm waiting for some comments, so I know the people are watching, if you enjoy these classes, as much as I do, you can show your support and your appreciation by going to our website and buying raffle tickets. We are in the last week of our raffle for $15,000 cash and for 2 round-trip tickets to Israel and tickets to New York and some cool watches. The website is mychabadcenter.org/raffle. Again, mychabadcenter.org/raffle. And you can show your support and your appreciation for these wonderful classes we offer free of charge for anyone that wants. So that'll be greatly appreciated. Okay. Now that we said that, if you're watching, please say hi so we can feel your presence. Right? Who's watching? Oh, she will be. Karen, if you're watching, send a message. Post. Let's see if Kim is telling the truth. I'm just joking. I'm not doubting Kim. God forbid. But what? Who's watching? Ravit's watching. Ravit, are you watching? Oh, Ravit's watching. Look at that. Okay. Did you see her comment before me, or Ravit? You just validated Kim, so she says thank you to you. Okay. Baruch Hashem. Who else? Let's go. Give me some more names. Let's see. That's all you know, huh? Okay. And for anyone watching from Colombia, our hearts and our souls are with people in Colombia that are obviously going through tremendous, I don't know what the word is, chaos, upheaval, confusion, fear, chaos. Hashem should give them strength and kayach and good things. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, my friends. Good evening, Ravit. Good evening, everyone else who's watching. Okay. So, as always, our learning is in memory of Yitzchak ben Yosef. And again, if you want to support, be part of the summer raffle that ends next Monday, mychabadcenter.org/raffle. And let us begin. So, last week we talked about Rabbi Akiva, right? And I'm going to get not so detailed this week. I really want you to understand the big picture of the Jewish story of how we get to where we're going to get to. But if you remember, we had talked about, good evening, Shira, how are you? If you remember, we had been talking, if you remember the basic picture of the Jewish story, the Jews are very independent. Oh, good evening, Marsha. Good evening, Steve. How are you? So, Steve, you didn't know he was watching, did you, Kim? Good evening, and good evening, Barbara. I was walking late today. How are you? Okay, so let's start over. So, if you, we only like one sentence in. It's okay. Even though for you, I'll do a lot more than one sentence, but we're really only one sentence in. So we're trying to get the big picture, okay? Jewish people are living in Jerusalem and Israel. We're an independent nation. We're living in our own land, and the Romans come and they conquer Jerusalem. They destroy the temple, and they establish their control over Israel. The Jews don't like that. Although the Romans were not so easy to destroy. The Romans were an extremely powerful empire, if you know anything about history. And eventually, after 70 plus years, in the year 132 CE, along comes a great warrior, also a very religious man, a very inspiring, charismatic leader who doesn't just organize a small little revolution or rebellion in his community, with his people, but he's able to organize literally a nationwide resistance against the Romans, able to really create a government under the table with proper channels of sending food and aid and convoys and government and legal documents and leases, as we discussed. And he gets rid of the Romans, creates a sense of independence in the land of Israel. And after 2.5, 3 years, the Romans crushed that. And that is the beginning of not only the end of any last attempt of Jewish independence until 1948, but more importantly, for the context of tonight's discussion, it begins a time of terrible, terrible Roman oppression. Really, really dark times in Jewish history. From the worst eras in all of Jewish history is the next 100, 200 years or so of the Roman oppression against the Jews in Israel. They decide, in the beginning, when the Romans first destroyed, even when they destroyed Jerusalem, their agenda wasn't necessarily an anti-Jewish agenda per se. It was, we want to be the masters. We want to have total control over all of our, states, vassal countries, and we want to quash any rebellion. And if the temple is a place that inspires rebellion against the Romans, we'll destroy the temple. We'll raze it to the ground. And the Romans had thought that by not just conquering Jerusalem and breaking the walls, but by razing the ground and literally destroying any sense of Jewish identity, the Jews will submit to the Romans. But it didn't happen that way. And when they were finally able to destroy Beitar, and we talked about how they wouldn't even let the Jews bury the dead, and you had 500,000 bodies laying unburied for a year, perhaps more, depending on different opinions, began the time of terrible, terrible oppression called Gzeras Hashmad, or Mamlechas Hashmad, the time where there was a deliberate plan and an agenda by the Romans to destroy Judaism. Because they understood Judaism is going to keep on, inspiring and invigorating a resistance amongst the Jewish people. And so now begins a time of tremendous oppression, tremendous darkness, tremendous persecution, specifically targeting not just the nation living in the land of Israel, but targeting the religion of Judaism, targeting the Jewish people as a people. And there were many, many decrees. So much so that there's a discussion in the Gemara that there's a rabbi called Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha who even made a statement that he raised the possibility that perhaps Jewish people should stop having children and producing a generation that will not be able to live as Jews. The Romans had forbidden circumcision, they had forbidden Shabbos, they had forbidden studying Torah, they had forbidden everything. They would shut it all down. So this rabbi, Shmuel ben Elisha, says, why are we going to give birth to children if they can't practice, if they're not going to be able to do anything in the Torah, they won't be able to keep the holidays, they won't be able to keep Shabbat, they won't even be able to circumcise their children. Why give birth? You are correct. There were some people in Egypt who said that. Now, obviously, that was not the accepted stance of the rabbis, and that was obviously not what happened. But the very fact that someone even voiced something like that already gives you an idea of how difficult of an oppression we're talking about, that there's a rabbi who's even willing to say something like that. That alone gives you an understanding. This is dark times. This is a difficult, difficult period for the Jewish people. The Gemara in Sanhedrin 32b, just learning it before, is describing how the Romans outlawed a bris. And again, I don't think I carry in every single detail and every single story. We'll get lost all night. I want to give you the big picture, but just to give you a sense of what it was like to live in that time. So you were not allowed to have a bris, to have a circumcision. And so when the child was born, today a child is born, you send invitations, or today you make a little Canva, write a little image, and you send it out with a picture of the baby. Back then in the communities, they couldn't announce a bris because whoever was caught doing a bris or going to bris, they would be killed. And they would kill the baby. So you know what they would do? They had a secret code with the mill. And it says in one town, the city of Braina, the code of a bris was how they turned the mill. So the Jews knew if you walked by, the mill was in the middle of town. Everyone saw the mill. If the mill turned a certain way or made a certain thing, there was a code in the mill, and that's how the Jews would know that there's going to be a bris. So at a baby, you're invited as a bris next Tuesday. Listen, the way the mill is turning. In a different town, the Talmud says, the code was with a lamp. There was a certain house that had a lamp, and based on which window the lamp was in, the lamp was a code. And the Romans didn't know this secret code amongst the Jews, but they would walk by and they would say, oh, look, there's a lamp. No, Wednesday is going to be a bris. And that's how they knew. That's how they weren't allowed to say the word bris. People were afraid to even mention that in their home, there's going to be a circumcision, because that would mean death to the child and death to the parents. And so there were secret codes by which they would tell people where the bris are going to be. I mean, it's a fascinating detail because the Romans, they tried to stop the bris. They weren't able to. The only thing they stopped was the invitations. But the bris still happened, just in a different way of letting people know about it.
So interesting that still today we don't invite people to our bris.
Yeah, you're right. So we don't invite people because we don't want to offend Elijah the prophet. You're right. So there's a custom today that when we have a bris, we don't invite someone. Because if I invite you and you don't come, you're kind of snubbing Elijah the prophet who's also coming to the bris. So we inform. It's a very Jewish way of inviting people. It's very passive aggressive, I'm not inviting you, but I'm inviting you. If you don't come, I'll be offended. Imagine you get offended if you don't come without even inviting, whatever. But it's very Jewish, confusing, scratching your ear like this. We do this sometimes, a little. So, what? Yeah. So I'm giving you a little bit of a picture of the oppression. And it's in this time that we have the story of Rabbi Akiva, who's only one of many rabbis. His story is the most amazing because of the absolute transition from uneducated ignoramus to one of the greatest of all scholars, which is the story of Rabbi Akiva we talked about last week. But we talked a little bit about the oppression he went through. He was in the times of our Kochba, and we talked at the end of last week's class. How did he die? Not burning. They pulled the skin of his flesh as he was alive. Took boiling hot iron combs right out of the fire and pulled apart the flesh of his body as he was still living. And as they took off the flesh of his tefillin, he was smiling. He told the students, my whole life I was waiting if I could have this moment of sacrifice. He said the Shema, and that's how he died. Gives you an idea of the time we're living in. And why did they kill him? He wasn't some counter-revolutionary rebel. He was killed for teaching Torah. I told you the story last week of one of his other friends that said, don't teach Torah, they'll kill you. And he said, if I don't teach Torah, I'll for sure die. But that's why he was tortured to death, for teaching Torah. So the Romans are on a mission. We need to stop the spread of Torah and of Jews teaching the next generation how to be Jewish, because this is fueling this never-ending spirit of revolution and rebellion against the Romans and the desire to bring back a temple and to bring back their way of life. We need to crush this. And so one of the many laws that the Romans decided to pass was a law banning smicha. Now, let me explain to you what this is. Smicha means, today, and it means rabbinic certification, rabbinic ordination. So if you go into my office, you'll see hanging over my desk a framed smicha certificate, which is a certificate that I was ordained as a rabbi. Now, today's smicha is not the same as back then because we don't have today that direct chain from student to teacher, from student to teacher, or the other way around, from teacher to student, as then. But if you've ever studied Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, how does the very, very first Mishnah of Ethics of Our Fathers begin? Anyone knows? Nobody? Anyone watching online? Hello, everyone that's watching. Hello, Gail. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Mario. Hello, Alice. Hello, Miyakel. Anyone watching online might know the very opening of the entire Ethics of Our Fathers is that Moshe Kibo Torah Mis Sinai. Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai, and he handed it over to Yehoshua, to Joshua, and Joshua gave it to the elders, and the elders gave it to the prophets, and the prophets gave it to the men of the Anshe Knesset Agdol, the men of the Great Assembly, etc., etc. And the Mishnah describes a very clear line of transmission going from the teacher, Moses, to the student, Joshua. And then one day, Joshua becoming the teacher to the next student, and on and on. And in fact, we have an unbroken chain of people who literally transferred of their rabbinic ability to give rabbinic rulings and to give rabbinic fines, etc., that used to be back in the day. They were passed on. It was really with 3 rabbis to the next. This only was allowed to happen in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel. So Rambam writes, smicha, the real, authentic, the original, the real way smicha happened was only by a court, only in the land of Israel. You could not receive smicha outside of Israel. And the Romans were busy killing all the rabbis, killing them all. We have the famous 10 martyrs. I'll talk about another one later tonight. They were killing them all. At this time, if you remember, we talked about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 5 students. If you remember, I told you this last week. he had 24,000 students, and they all died. And yet Rabbi Akiva did not give up. He started again. He found 5 students. He started teaching them again. But these students were not yet ordained. They weren't yet given the official smicha. And then, as the Romans have made this rule, and the Romans are very, very afraid that they're going to try and continue. I should also tell you that even though the Romans had allowed the rabbis to congregate in Yavne, if you remember, we learned 2 or 3 weeks ago that when the Romans were surrounding and besieging the city of Jerusalem, they had given Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai permission to make a yeshiva in the north, in Yavne. Remember that? And that's where for a while the rabbis were. But because of the Roman oppression was so bad, even this gathering of rabbinic authority in the city of Yavne in the north, like away from all the action, was forced to move. And the Talmud of Rosh Hashanah says that from Yavne, the yeshiva, or the gathering of rabbis, moved to a place called Usha. And from Usha, then they had to escape from there. They went back to Yavne. And then from Yavne, they went back to Usha. And from there, they went to Shefaram, and there to Beit She'arim, and from there to Tzipori, and from there to Tiberias. Even the rabbis that were officially gathering, leading the Jewish people, were on the run, not able to stay in the same place for too long, because the Romans were really on their backs, really breathing down and really giving them a hard time. And so it's in this context of the rabbis moving and no future rabbis ordained, and almost the end of Judaism, almost the end of rabbinic Torah Judaism. There are almost no rabbis left to teach. It's almost over. Comes along the hero of tonight's discussion, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin says about him, if Yehuda says in the name of Rav, remember him for good, because he was the one that if not for him, all the laws of financial rulings and financial authority of the courts would have been nullified from Israel forever. Meaning people may have still been able to study, but there would have been no more ordained rabbis left and no more rabbinic authority left amongst the Jewish people. Now, what's the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava? Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was already an older rabbi. Now, all this was an introduction to tell you the story because you need to understand the time and the oppression and the difficulties in which we're living. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava sees that there's no rabbis left. And the Romans had made a law to prevent anyone from ordaining a rabbi. They had made a law that if anyone ordains and teaches someone to become a rabbi, they will kill the person who gave the smicha. They'll kill the person who received the smicha. They're going to kill the city in which it happened, meaning death for the ordainer, death for the ordained, destruction for the city in which the smicha happened, and to uproot the boundaries around the city. That's what the Romans decreed. We were living in very, very dark times. Some of the darkest years in all of Jewish history. So no one could teach. Because it wasn't just like, I'm willing to risk my life to teach. Because it's not just me risking my life. The student is also risking their life. The city is being put at risk, and the surrounding boundaries even would be destroyed. So what does he do? What does he do in this very, very difficult situation? So Yehuda ben Bava goes, he takes the 5 remaining great rabbis of the Jewish people. And he takes these 5 men. The names are Rabbi Meir, we'll talk about him in a minute, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, we've all heard of him, the author of the Zohar, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. And some rabbis, Rabbi Avia says that there was a 6th rabbi, Rabbi Nehemiah. 5 or 6 rabbis. And he goes out to a place between 2 large mountains outside the boundaries of any city. So he's in between Usha, which was one of the places where the rabbis would gather, and Shefarim, which was another city. But he's in the mountains in between them, more than the distance of the Shabbos boundary of any city. So he's literally in the no man's land. And in this no man's land, sitting between these 2 large mountains, in these 2 large cities, but he's not near either one of them, he starts to teach these 5 students to be able to continue the teachings of the traditions we have all the way going back to Moses at Mount Sinai. and he's teaching them. And he's teaching them these 5 rabbis, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shamuel. There's no celebration. There's no public, no, today when you have a graduation, what happens is pictures and there's clapping and you walk across the stage in your gown and you get some fancy diploma. There's no diploma. There's no crowd. There's no picture. There isn't even a speech. You know what the speech was? The Romans were coming. The Romans found out he was teaching them. He gave them smicha. Now I don't get too technical, but smicha required 3 rabbis. But part of the way you give proper smicha was 3 rabbis. So there were probably 2 other rabbis together with Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, but he was the lead rabbi, and he took responsibility. And anyway, he hears that the rabbis are coming, so he says to them, the shortest graduation speech ever. You know what the shortest graduation speech ever is? Close. 1 word longer than that. My sons run. But you were very close. Banai ratsu. My sons run. Marcia, this is a 2-word speech. Literally a 2-word graduation speech. You graduated, rabbis, run. My sons, rather. Banai rutsu. Run. Run for your lives. Now what do they say? Imagine after a speech, the guy giving speeches, you can run. Everyone just runs, right? They say, we don't want to run. What about you? We don't want to leave you behind for the Romans. We want to take you. He says to them, I'm too old to run with you. Let me die over here. Don't worry about me. What happens to me will happen to me. What's important is that you guys escape. You run. Don't let me slow you down. Well, I'll tell this in a second. He tells them, don't let me slow you down. Don't let me be you have to run. I'm going to stop the Romans. And the Romans come to this place to the mountains where I guess they had informants or whoever. They knew that this is where the rabbis were. They probably had informers. And the Roman soldiers come running to this place and they see Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. And they say, old man, where are the students? And Rabbi doesn't answer them. And it says in the Gemara that they did not leave there until 300 iron spears went through his body. They killed him with 300 iron spears. It says that his body looked like a sieve. You know what a sieve is? Right? You strain your pasta, and there's a lot of holes in that sieve. That's what the body of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava looked like a sieve full of holes. But he allowed himself to be literally, brutally put to death, stabbed 300 times. But to allow they were busy stabbing him, and the other students were able to run for their lives and to escape and to keep Judaism alive. This is the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. And he did it it's an amazing story because on one hand, he understood the tremendous risk. It wasn't oblivious to the risk. He didn't say I don't care, I'm going to teach Torah in public. He understood the danger. So he took these 5 students secretly, when no one should know, found the location in the mountains, in between the big cities, where the Romans couldn't punish anybody else. He made sure that he should slow down the Romans, allowed his students to flee, and because of his giving his life to ensure that his students could survive, indeed, it says in the Gemara that because of him, that the authority of the rabbis continued. And therefore the Gemara says about him, remember him for good. Remember him for good, because he is the one that saved Judaism. So the Gemara says about him. Now, who are these 5 sons? These 5 students? Yeah, 300 iron lanterns, yeah. Now, by the way, I'll say one more thing. How do the students honor their teacher? Not by staying at his side. They honored him by running from him, but by carrying his legacy. And sometimes the greatest act of love is not to stay by the side of the person you love, but to move on. As parents, we struggle with that, right? You got to sometimes let go of your child and let them. And the way to honor your parent is not to just stay home forever, but to grow up. And yes, I know you're giving me a look, but to grow up and to my sons run. It was another whole conversation. Now, so we have these 5 students of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, who, by the way, are also the 5 students of Rabbi Akiva. And I double-checked this again today, because when the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Akiva restarted with 5 students, it's the same 5 students. But Rabbi Akiva was not able to give them smicha. He didn't have that unbroken chain from Moses. didn't have the authority. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, who was after Rabbi Akiva also died. He was killed, died. He was murdered. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was the one that ensured that Rabbi Akiva's teaching of these 5 students should continue within a formal authority to be able to continue Judaism. Now, these 5 students are not the same. They're not the same. They're 5 very different students. The best proof and example of this is a very, very famous story that you know in the context of one of the rabbis. I'll tell you the story. The story that 3 rabbis were sitting and talking about the Romans. They were Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. 3 of the 5 students that the Gemara says were taught smicha by Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. One of the 3 students, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, actually was his full name, he was praising the Romans. Look what the Romans did. They built bathhouses, they built bridges, they built roads, the Romans were very big into building infrastructure, building plumbing, building Colosseum, building bathhouses. They were very big into, they made roads and bridges and Rabbi Yossi was quiet. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, he mocked Rabbi Yehuda, said, do you think they're building these bathhouses because they care about cleanliness and about public, what's the word? Not sanitation. Public hygiene. They don't care about hygiene. They're collecting the money. They're charging. It's a business. They're making money out of it. They want to do, sorry, that was the bridges. They're doing it for the immorality, for the parties, and for the things that take place inside these bathhouses. You think they build bridges because they want to build bridges, help people travel? They're collecting the tolls. It's a business. They're making money on these public bridges, etc. Everything the Romans do, they do for their own benefit, for their own purpose. There's no kindness or altruistic motives amongst the Romans. They're doing it for their own benefit. Now, unbeknownst to these 3 rabbis, one of the students that they were sitting there was actually a spy for the Romans. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I didn't get a chance to look it up today. Regardless, he went back to the Romans and he repeated the whole conversation. And he told the Romans, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi praised you for all the infrastructure upgrades. Rabbi Yossi was silent, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai criticized you. And that's when Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi was elevated to become the official spokesman of the Jewish people in Rome. Rabbi Yossi, because he was silent, was exiled to Tzipori, which was a city in the north. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was forced to run away for his life. And that's the story of Rabbi Shimon in the cave for 12 years, right? And then the 13th year, if you know the story, which we've said many times, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai hiding in the cave. That's the context. I'm giving you now the historical context of why he ended up in the cave, where he became the author of the Zohar, where he achieved spiritual levels of spiritual greatness that a regular human being is not going to achieve living in a regular lifestyle.
Was it his son?
Yes, his son Rabbi Elazar was with him as well.
So how did he get to the cave?
They went together.
He was part of the.
No, he wasn't one of the 5 rabbis. Rabbi Shimon was one of the 5 rabbis. Rabbi Shimon has a son who was a much younger man. I don't know exactly how old he was at the time. His son was not one of the rabbis who were ordained by. Today, smicha is like he's part of the yeshiva. Like you're 20 years old, you get smicha. Back then, you had to already be an experienced sage to get smicha. So Rabbi Shimon was one of the 5 sages ordained by Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. When he was forced to flee for his life, first he went to go hide, just to know all the details of the story. He first went to go hide in the shul, where his wife would come and bring him food every single day. And then he decided this is too risky, because if my wife knows where I am, the Romans could arrest her, interrogate her, you can imagine how they'd interrogate her to make her divulge my whereabouts. For her benefit, and for his too, but for her safety, it's better if she does not know where I am. And so he went with his son. He left the hiding place, went out to the mountains, to the caves, and he hid in the cave where even his wife didn't know where he was. And he spent 12 years without any human contact besides for his son that was with him. And he studied with Elijah the prophet at that time. He studied with angels. And that's why he reached the spiritual levels of greatness he achieved, where he was able to write the Zohar. And the foundations of Kabbalah was during this time of tremendous spiritual, removal. He was sitting in the sand without clothing, just sitting and learning literally day and night without any interruption whatsoever. Rabbi Shimon Yochai was a man who was Teirasa Ibnasi. His Torah was his whole life. He had no other life besides learning Torah. He had literally no other life besides reciting Torah. So, but that's not the way most of us are meant to live our lives. That's one of the students. The point is, 3 of the 5 are as different as could be. One is pro the Romans. One is very clearly anti the Romans. And one is a very savvy politician. He doesn't say anything. He plays it safe. But they didn't have the same opinion on how to deal with the Romans. Now, I don't think that Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, who praised the Romans, really thought the Romans were the best. He just understood that the way you deal with a much stronger enemy is by befriending them and by making friends with your enemies and having influence. In I'm sure that was his mindset. The point is, he had a very different perspective on how to deal with the Romans than Rabbi Shimon Yochai, who said, "I'm not going to be nice to them. I'm going to say it as it is." Right? It's a different kind of person, different kind of perspective on life. The other sage, the first of the sages, is a man called Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is also from the greatest sages. So he's after Rabbi Akiva. He is considered one of the greatest sages in Jewish history. In fact, we have a rule, which is as follows: that if you were to open up a Mishnah, okay, there's 63 volumes of the Mishnah. There's thousands and thousands, like 5,000 something Mishnahs. I don't know how many Mishnahs. There's a lot of Mishnahs. Many of them have names. Rabbi Akiva said this, Rabbi Hillel said that, but a majority of them don't have a name. So the Talmud tells us, whenever you have a stam Mishnah, which means whenever you have an unattributed teaching in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah just gives a ruling without giving a name to the ruling, the assumption is that this is a ruling of Rabbi Meir. Meaning Rabbi Meir was such a great rabbi, his wisdom was so accepted, and his teachings were so considered so authoritative, that whenever he made a statement, that was a statement the Mishnah didn't even have to say his name. When you say a name, it implies a certain opinion. That's your opinion. Okay, and Asa says that. And March says that. When Rabbi Meir said it wasn't an opinion of an individual. This is the way it was. And so Rabbi Meir becomes one of the greatest greatest teachers, who was a genius, very, very smart man. Many stories of Rabbi Meir's brilliance. And Rabbi Meir is the primary architect of the Mishnah. Next week we'll talk about the writing of the Mishnah, how we get to the written oral laws. We have it today, the written version of Judaism by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. But you have to know that the main teacher, the main architect, the main author is this Rabbi Meir, one of these 5 students who was ordained by Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Okay, you guys following that? Okay. Now, since we're talking about Rabbi Meir, I want to also mention his wife. The Meir's wife is a very, very famous woman too in the Talmud. His wife is considered from the wisest of women in the Talmud. Her name was Bruria. And the Talmud tells us a number of stories about the wife of Rabbi Meir, Bruria, who would sit in the women's section during his classes. And if he stopped without finishing something, she from the women's section would call out and finish off his classes for him. She was assisting from the other side of the shul. She was assisting in the classes. Many very wise stories of her. Some famous ones is that in the neighborhood of Rabbi Meir, there were these hooligans, these troublemakers, who were always trying to make trouble for Rabbi Meir, doing different pranks, different problems, ordering Domino's pizza, 20 pies of pizza at his house at midnight. I don't think they did that back then. Whatever the pranks were you did back then, it wasn't ordering pizza. I don't know, it was ordering something else. Whatever pranks, they did just to terrorize Rabbi Meir and his wife, make his life miserable. And one time, Rabbi Meir ran out of patience for these troublemakers, and what he did? He put a curse on them. He prayed that they should die. Now, you have to realize, no. They were just neighborhood gangsters, neighborhood ruffians, hooligans. They were the neighborhood troublemakers. And he was their target. They didn't like a rabbi in the neighborhood, So they would pick on him, and they would do whatever. I don't know exactly what pranks they would do, but they would do stuff to bother him. Now, in those days, Rabbi, like if you sin, you deserve punishment. Rabbi Shimon Yochai came out of the cave. He saw someone working in the field, and what did he do? He burnt the whole field down. So he prayed that they should die. And Bruria, his wife, says to him a very famous teaching in the Talmud, based on the verse, don't pray that the sinners should die, pray that their sins should die. Don't say yitamu chatoyim v'loy chaytim. The chatoyim, the sins should perish, not the sinners should perish. Pray that the sins should die, and then they'll change and become righteous people. And he praised his wife for her correct teaching, her correct brilliance. He changed his prayer that they should end up, their sins should die. And indeed, they all changed their ways and they became students of Rabbi Meir. Okay? It's another very, very famous story of Rabbi Meir's wife, Bruria, also about in the Talmud. There's other stories over. This is a very famous, a very powerful story, which I've said before. I almost don't want to say it because it's like too powerful. It's a little bit of a distraction. But she was one Shabbos afternoon. Her two sons came home while her husband was teaching in the yeshiva Shabbos afternoon. And both of them passed away, right? You know the story. They passed away. And when he comes home at the end of Shabbos, he says, where are the boys? I didn't see them in the yeshiva today. They weren't in the synagogue. Where are they? Now, she had put them to lie on the bed where they were both passed. She says to her husband, let's first finish the Shabbos meal, and then we'll find them later. She didn't want to ruin the joy of Shabbos by telling her husband the two children had died. Anyway, they finished the service, finished Shabbos. He's like, I want to make Havdalah. Where are the boys? I didn't see them all afternoon. She says, let's first make Havdalah. Let's make the proper separation between Shabbos and the weekday, and then we'll go look for them. So he listens to his wife. He makes Havdalah. Makes the blessing of separation between Shabbos and the weekday. Again, he says to his wife, like, where are the boys? So she takes it by the hand. She says to him, I have a question for you. Before we go find them, I have a question. Earlier today, I got a very, very special gift from someone as a collateral on loan to watch as a collateral this precious item. And I really love it. But now this owner of the object came back. He wants his items back. But I really love them. I don't want to give them back. What should I do? So Rabbi Meir says to his wife, what's the question? If they belong to that person, even though you really like them and really want them, they're not yours. You can't keep them. You have to give them back. She takes him by the hand and she leads him to the room where the two boys are lying dead on the bed. And she says to him, God gave us a collateral and God entrusted us to watch for him these two sons. But now God has decided to come and take them back. And then he praises his wife with the praises of the Eishes Chayil. He says that the woman of the Eishes Chayil, the woman of valor, the wise woman, there's no one as wise as Bruria was able to soften I'm not sure the word would be, the pain. Yeah. Soften the pain and to soften the grief that he would feel on seeing that his two of his sons had died. He describes her with glowing praises for the Eishes Chayil that knew how to describe this death. It's a beautiful story. It's in the Eishes Chayil, we say Friday night. So that's why I said behind every great man is a great woman. And indeed, one of the greatest rabbis in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, is Rabbi Meir. And indeed, behind this great rabbi was a very great Rebbitzin, which is to her credit. Okay. And the last of the five, so that's Rabbi Meir. And the last of the five students is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, who is not so well known. The others are all much more famous. Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi became the leader of the Jewish people again for the Romans. Rabbi Shimon Yochai became the author of the Zohar. Rabbi Meir became the primary author of the Mishnah. So you're talking about literally the greatest rabbis that we have today. When you study a Mishnah, chances are you're studying a teaching of Rabbi Meir. If you study any Chassidus, any Kabbalah, chances are you're studying something based on the teachings of Rabbi Shimon, two of these five students. But this last student, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, he teaches in Pirkei Avos something beautiful. He's the one who says, let the honor of your student be as dear to you as your own. Let the honor of your student be as dear to you as your own. Let the honor of your student, when you honor your student, don't treat him like, you're just a stupid. You're just a student. Treat him as the way you would want to be treated yourself, as if you're an equal. Honor your colleague, who's on your equal. Honor him the way you would honor your teacher. So don't honor him like a friend, like a colleague, like where I'm polite to you. Give him the reverence you would give to your teacher. And give honor to your teacher the way you give reverence to God. Like elevate them all. So your student, treat him not like a student, but like a colleague. A colleague, treat not like a friend, but like a teacher. Your teacher, give him the reverence you would give to God himself. And so you see that he was very much into the human element, into not just the Torah, but ensuring that the world will continue, etc. These are the 5 students of original Rabbi Akiva who are now the future of Judaism. Okay. Now, Shir HaShirim, which is in the Medrash, Shir HaShirim, it says that what happened, Medrash says that these 5 sages, eventually, the Roman oppression would end a little bit. The sages gather in Usha. Usha was one of the cities where the rabbis went back and forth. And you have there these 5 rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shiva Yochai. Rabbi Nehemiah was the 6th rabbi, and other sages. And they send a message throughout the Galilee. Send a message. And what's their message? They say, if you know Torah, come teach. And if you don't know Torah, come learn. And these rabbis reestablished the first yeshiva in years after the tremendous Roman oppression, after the death of Hadrian and other of the really, really difficult Roman governors and the emperors that really oppressed the Jewish people. These are the rabbis that the Medrash says gathered in Usha and sent out a message. If you know Torah, come teach. We need teachers. And if you don't know, come learn. And the people came to learn. Okay.
The Romans still in charge?
Yeah, the Romans were still in charge.
They
Well,
let them do that?
They did. It wasn't. They sent out a message. People came to learn. The oppression did get less. Yes. So they reached a point. I don't know exact year, but after Hadrian died, and there were other wasn't only Hadrian. There were others that were very, very bad. It does describe that there was a time when things got better. There was because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's time already, he was very good friends. I'm going to say the story next week. So I'm going to say the story next week. I'm talking about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and I'll tell you the story of him and the Roman emperor who were changed at childhood. I can't jump ahead.
Okay.
I'll tell you the story next week. But things will get better for the Jews. This is the period of the greatest darkness, a period when literally, we were on the verge of the candle of Torah being blown out. And the one who's able to bridge between the end of the generation of scholars with Rabbi Akiva and the future was this one Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, an old man who gave his life to ensure not that he would survive, but that his teachings would survive. So now I want to share one more story, which is a story about another rabbi at this exact same time period, whose name was Rabbi Hananiah ben Trajan. Rabbi Hananiah ben Trajan was also, at this time, he's one of the 10 martyrs. We read his story every year on Yom Kippur. Every year on Yom Kippur, we read this story. And he was one of the great, great teachers of the Torah, a great teacher. And his whole life, he refused to stop teaching. Again, the Romans had said anyone who's caught teaching Torah will be killed, will be put to death. And he insisted on teaching. And sure enough, the Romans found him teaching Torah, and they were going to kill him. And as they were going to kill him, they decided they're not just going to kill him a regular death. That would be too easy. Instead, how are they going to kill him? They're going to wrap his body in the Torah scroll. They put between his body and the Torah scroll, they put wet wool wrapped around his heart. And then they built a fire around him. Again, these are barbaric people. These are barbaric people. You read the stories of the 10 martyrs. It's very, very difficult stories. And they wrap his body. If I'm not mistaken, by the way, Bruria was the sister of Rabbi Hananiah ben Trajan, the wife of Rabbi Meir. This is his brother-in-law, Rabbi Meir's brother-in-law. If I'm not mistaken. There were many great rabbis that were killed, but they took one, Yezber Chalafta, who was a teacher of Torah. He was a translator of Torah. And when they chopped since he would teach Torah with his tongue, they chopped his head off. They put his tongue in the dirt. Then they fed it to pigs. tongue that taught Torah was fed to the pigs. They were very, very horrific people. So they took this Rabbi Hanania ben Tzadin, they wrapped his body in wet wool. It would take a long time to burn because it was wet. They wrapped the Torah scroll around him, that was in water, and they set him on fire. They set the Torah on fire to burn with the wet wool, keeping him from dying too fast. Why did Hashem allow it? That's an excellent question. I wish that God would give me the wisdom to understand the ways of God, but I'm not his spokesman. If God wanted me to be a spokesman, I'll take the job. It probably pays well, but God's ways are beyond human comprehension, right? There's other, I can go more long, but let's not get distracted yet. So Rabbi Hanania ben Tzadin is sitting. He's tied up with his Torah scroll around his body, and the Torah scroll is burning, and there's a fire around him burning, and he's alive. And the students that are watching their teacher being burnt alive for the crime of teaching Torah. And by the way, it's not just he taught Torah. They took the very Torah scroll he was teaching and used that as a vehicle of the torture, of a sadistic, evil torture. And they wrap it and they ask him, Rabbi, what do you see? What do you see? At this moment before he dies. You know what he answers? He says one of the most beautiful, powerful statements in the Talmud. He says to his students, I see the parchment is burning, but the letters are flying to heaven. The parchment is burning, but the letters themselves are not being burnt. Only the parchment is being burnt. Parchment is burning, the letters are flying on high, ascending on high. It's a very, very powerful statement. And this is exactly what Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava did. It's literally the same story. Because Rome came, and what did they try to do? To burn the parchment. Rome came and said, we're going to burn the Torah scroll. But the only thing that they were able to do is to burn the scroll. The letters of the scroll. The teachings, which is what really defines the Torah scroll. It's not the piece of paper. It's not the physical length of the actual parchment. What defines the Torah scroll is the words in the Torah scroll. The words of the Torah scroll, the letters of the Torah, didn't get burnt. They ascended on high. At this period in history, after the destruction of the temple, and even worse, after the destruction of Beitar, and after the brutal murder of Rabbi Akiva, and of these great rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda ben Chalafta, and Rabbi Hanania ben Tzadin, Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, and all of the great leaders and rabbis of the Jewish community were killed and executed by the Romans, one after another, so 10 martyrs, killed one after another. It looked like there was a period when the Jewish people would lose the ability to transmit to the next generation. It looked like we would lose that ability to keep on teaching, keep on passing on, keep on giving over what it is we need to be giving over. And yet, it was at that time that Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava came and single-handedly said, I'm going to make sure that even if they kill me, the Torah itself will continue. The Torah will continue no matter what. And that's the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, making sure Torah continues. And so this is a very, very powerful lesson for us. We try not to do the me in the history, right? The me in the story. So what's the lesson for us from this story? What life lesson can we, Baruch Hashem, we think things are bad, we think things are tough, and anti-Semitism, Baruch Hashem, compared to what the Jews were living through under the Romans, it's not even comparable. It's not even like night and day. We live in tremendous peace, relatively speaking. We're protected by our government. We have protections. We have rights. We have liberties. We have freedom. So what's the lesson for us today from the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava? Any thoughts? Yeah. But yes. Obviously, the future. But making sure the Torah gets passed on. Obviously the future. Really the future. But making sure, because Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava could have gone to a private hilltop somewhere, and he could have studied Torah, and the Romans probably wouldn't have killed him. There was no crime for studying Torah. The crime that the Romans were killing people for was a crime of teaching Torah. Correct. And if he would have just said, I'm going to study Torah, I'm not going to, do it publicly. I'm not going to I'll sit in a corner, I'll find a cave and I'll study Torah. He would have lived. But he would not have continued on the Jewish people. And the lesson for us, the meaning of the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, is how important it is to make sure that we pass on what we know to the next generation and to other people. And to make sure that Torah continues beyond us. Not just in our environment. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava wasn't trying to keep them close to him. He told them, go, run. My sons, run. Take what you know and share it further. And make sure that there's a continuation. But this, I think, is a very powerful life lesson for us from the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. The ability to see beyond myself and beyond what's in my best comfort and what's best for me, but to ensure the future of Judaism and to ensure the future of the teachings of the Torah. And that's the story of this very, very, very dark time. God willing, next week, we'll get to the next generation, which is Rabbi Yehuda ben Hanasi and the writing of the Mishnah and Judaism as we know it today. Yeah.
More people are studying Torah today than ever before.
That is an excellent question. The question is, I'll repeat the question. Good evening, everyone that's watching. Good evening, Joseph and Carmen and everyone else, and Carlos and Gloria. Marsha's question is, are more people studying Torah today than ever before? I read something fascinating. I don't remember the statistics. I don't remember exactly, but it's definitely possible. So I don't ever before. In the times of after the destruction of the temple, all the Jews were studying Torah until the Romans came and they did everything they could to stop it. And the Romans did a very good job at challenging. It took very, very brave people to keep Torah going on, but it's not the same after that.
With the internet and with accessibility to the information.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I can't tell you like confidence exact, but yeah, if you look through history and a lot of, depending on the era, there were a lot of eras where you had a vast majority of Jews that were not studying Torah. And today, definitely it's easier than ever before, that's for sure. It's a good question. I hope so. Regardless, we're getting to a time where a Mashiach arousal and where people are more close to Hashem and more Jews are more connected. We're living in interesting times. It's very black and white. People, either you were religious or you were not religious. There was no I'm quasi-religious, I'm secular, but I also keep Shabbos. I also I don't keep Shabbos, but I come to class and I learn. It wasn't like that. Either you were, all in religious, or you were outside the community. It was a very black and white, right? You're either in the shtetl or you're out of the shtetl. There was no, and the accessibility of Torah for sure, and the 100%, I think is very, very unique. I don't know if there's another time in history like this. I don't think so.
I give credit to Chabad, Rabbi.
Well, thank you. Saul gives credit to Chabad. And yeah, the Rebbe absolutely was a part of that. And the Rebbe was one of the greatest, which is amazing because the Rebbe was very much in the walls. The Rebbe was a Hasidic Rebbe who was in some ways very old world, very rigid and by the book and follow Jewish law. And he was as Hasidic, so to say, as you could be. And the Rebbe was the biggest believer in tearing down the walls, which no other Rebbe would do. Not only in Hasidic movements, even in the Litvish, we got to insulate ourselves. We got to protect ourselves. And that was always a Jewish mentality, that the world is a distraction to holiness, and you got to try and seclude yourself and protect yourself and not to allow yourself to be influenced by the world. Yeah, and the Rebbe tore down the walls and said, we got to bring Judaism to everyone and to everywhere, 100%. And that's our job. And that's what we're trying to do right here, trying to spread Yiddishkeit as much as possible to everyone that we can, which is why I'm going to go back to how I started. We're doing our summer raffle to help support that. Saul, thank you for setting me up for that, because you made it very easy. if you want to be part of bringing Judaism to anyone, to be as accessible as possible, you can just literally go online for free and watch a class. You can support our summer raffle at mychabadcenter.org/raffle. mychabadcenter.org/raffle. You can send me a message and hopefully I'll see it. Okay, any other questions? A little short. Okay. Next week will be like kind of the end of the story, and you'll see how we get to the way we have Judaism today with a written text, which we didn't have until this point. There was no written Torah. I mean, there was written Torah, there was written Bible, but there was no written laws, there was no written rules. It was all oral. It was all teacher to student. And it's the next generation, as really Jews are being scattered, and like the central is no longer a central authority at all, and there's no longer even smicha. It's when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi finally writes down the Mishnah, which we'll talk about God willing next week. Okay, my friends. My friend Lila Tov. Good evening, Dana, watching all the way from Washington State. Thank you, Carmen. Glad you're joining us from Texas. Hello, Joseph. Hello, everyone watching from all over. Lila Tov. Oh, Alice, Baltimore Safta. I like that. That's a great name. Good evening, Mario. How are you, my friend? Hello, Andrea. Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you, Lori. I'm glad you enjoyed. We'll see you next Monday. Same time, same place, same channel. Okay. Yes, Randy, 1 second. Yes. I think just tomorrow's the last day. She messaged me. 1 second. She messaged me. Okay. Can I ask you what should be coming? Today, tomorrow? Okay. My pleasure. Okay, let's go see what you got for us. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
In the Farnell market, there is the building, and then which is fine. And then you can signs and it's very clear what it is. They consider the morning over here, the drive-through, dropping off. Then it's kind of photos. And then that's not the same as the words in weekend. People that have never had any sort of authority, all of a sudden they said, okay, you're different than I. It's just something to decide. Is it? You're not really voting. You're just dropping the thing off. So they kept pushing everybody. And then we'll just back out of the first meeting. So, and then there's arguments.
I was gonna say, they look So the wife said, "Is it a date?" I said, "Oh, my husband goes to Sunday night, this class, and then, to the Chabad, I could like people that weren't Jewish, so that's why I had to check this, it's because it's Chabad."
It's true.
And also, anybody has a question, right away, they're like, "Oh, here's the answer."
You Google it and it takes you to the bottom. Yes.
Oh.
Last week's, and
Anyways, oh, we're all excited.
and so, I decided, what is, candle lighting in Medellin, Colombia? Directly, it took me to
Oh,
Havana. And there's only one Havana in
We
Medellin.
didn't say the prayer
And
yet.
if you, we were going.
Yeah.
Wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, it was just, it was. I know.
You know, I'm here.
Yeah. Where is she staying? I was able to get my food and, yeah. They have one Havana, she's usually washing. Okay, my dear.
Is it all this thing?
Rosh Hashanah is the time to ask for forgiveness, to give forgiveness. I pray that miracles.
Why are you the one that's saying, who are you? He didn't even want to show. There's a judge there that told him
Wow.
So really, from the Jew, not from the West. When you go to vote, you'll see.
My wife alone.
No.
And it's amazing how
Yeah, they got right.
This way, speed it up. They were getting so that's why.
It's a lot of schools, right? It's they're still measuring today.
So then I know it's.
They're still measuring today.
All their stuff was.
So, yeah.
Oh, I got it.
Or they could figure out.
No, her sister is fine, but I have.
So go inside the lawn, to go, but on the outside to each other. When the board of elections was at the library on Friday measuring,
I am all
they
there.
had it marked.
She said she didn't.
Yes, somebody
I
that
will.
was in charge. She doesn't know. The voting really is with 10 votes, so they started measuring out. So that had us out on the. General's not on the ballot now. I tell you, Evans is getting a lot of, a lot of traction.
Is he?
Yeah, a lot of traction. Yeah, it's signs
She's from. She would have
Yes,
before,
another staff.
but, Carol said that she's gonna, she was supposed to come.
And
It's so fresh.
then it's.
It's so fresh, a picture, a video.
On Instagram or?
She was, training was with them, and today, but yeah, she came to my house today.
All right, yeah, see you.
So she showed me a picture, yes, because I was asking her. So she's training,
You know, she's board and training.
yeah,
She knows.
yeah. So she's trying to get me aboard, the craziest dog. Cause this dog is like unbelievable.
Oh, it should be, that don't come back. But then you have to follow up.
Yeah,
Yeah, you need
but I
to.
asked her about, classes with, group classes. These individual classes are no good because the two dogs go, you know, one gets bad, so the other one follows. So I said, I need maybe group classes. So she showed me a picture of a group class. She goes, and that's Flash.
I thought that was Flash. I saw that today.
Yeah,
He's sitting over on the side.
and she called him and
Black
gave him
eye.
his hat.
Good boy.
He was such a good boy.
She doesn't send me enough videos.
Because she's busy.
She's getting a lot of, people.
Is she good?
Yeah, she said, do you want to sign up for September? I said, it just doesn't pay because there's too many holidays. She said, well, I'm getting booked through September and October.
Send the dog there for September. The band dog.
There's a bad dog. There's a bad dog and a scared dog.
Oh.
She'll probably look scary.
There's some, she wants the bad dog.
Oh, she does.
Yeah, because, well, she's the instigator, and the other one will follow whatever she does.
Which one is that? Dora?
Dora is the bad one.
That one, yeah.
Trina is the follower. Put her head down.
But they're good, right?
It's so sweet.
She wants us to enroll Flash in
Collar,
e-collar.
Oh, yeah,
leash.
off leash.
Oh, please.
I won't do it.
I don't know. But
I
my
told
daughter-
her that I wouldn't do it because, I'm afraid if something gets their attention and they take off,
They're long.
I
Well,
was-
that's what.
You're in
that's
charge.
what the e-collar-
You're in charge of it.
yes, I know. But you know what?
My daughter didn't give me an e-collar.
I had
Wait.
it, though.
Susie's got it.
I had it, you know, and unless it was really strong where it was like shocking, he just kept on going. So, I'm responsible for their habits. So they're off leash.
Yeah, could have been, should have been, would have been.
Especially the